Thanks for the awkward silence and patience. Great. Well, hello everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us for our fall lecture series. My name is David Russell Jensen. My Tlingit name is Shakaguk. I'm here at Sealaska Heritage. I serve as our development officer. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to our lecture today. Today is one of several free lectures over the next several months, 3 months to be exact. You can view the full lecture schedule online at sealaskaheritage.org. We're committed at Sealaska Heritage to providing accessible community programming, but none of it would be possible without the support of donors. You can contribute online at sealaskaheritage.org/donate, or if you're here in the audience in person, you can contribute via the donation envelopes at your seats. Today's lecture is presented by Dr. Lance Twitchell. For the past decade, Dr. has been working with language teachers, speakers, and learners to accurately document the number of speakers of the Lingít language. Published records and linguists were estimating somewhere between 50 and 500 speakers of the language. However, research with community leaders and language teachers, it was determined that the number may be closer to 100 and dropping. Once research included all known speakers or learners and approximate language levels, it became apparent that the number of speakers was actually growing. Lance Twitchell, Ph.D., is of Tlingit, Haida, Yup'ik and Sami heritage. He's a professor of Alaska Native Languages at the University of Alaska Southeast and is a multimedia artist who works in Northwest Coast design, poetry, screenwriting, music, film, and photography. There's an opportunity for question and answer at the end of the lecture today. Please type your questions in the chat or save them on the microphone in the audience. Thank you and welcome, Une.
Gonna chisho et the katuhan yak eti wasa shika khatati yayaki khati iki Sealaska Heritage Institute yeta khashqaini ya wasaq tu qone atyan daqin the katuhan ye awa wush kanakhtu da ati chakhonakhe ya hayuk atangi dat Qonea aksai shukach adi awe uhan. Ya ach ishas Yup'ik and Sami kagwantan koa achyet ach ish de yet uasa achawe kagwantan yeti ayachat gunchish ach shilko hasoi daklawedi yeke achsatini ya ach shilko gunchish kechati sawati Ya hayuk atangi ke gurtsin hayuk atangi yede kakwani kwanaxaya ya teya khawayakh tundetani yayaki Gulchish. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for this invitation. I always cherish the moments we have to speak about our languages and what is happening. My name is Khone. I'm Shukach Adi. I'm Double Eagle Kigani Haida. My nani is from Heidelberg. She was born in Waterfall, Alaska. And she's a source of my revolutionary spirit, I think, in terms of resisting things that you don't agree with and that are holding your people back. If you're listening to this and you have the authority to do so, go ahead and give the land back. We'll take it. That was an interesting time, and we'll just resume stewardship so that things don't get out of control. So I thought I was going through the words of Kashkar Cyril George. And when we start, we're going to look at some folks and some words that they shared with us, and we're going to analyze why these words are amazing. We won't do a full breakdown, but you can come to our classes. They're free now at UAS, and we'll talk about that. But the impact of his stories and what he shared with us, I cannot measure. I can only sit there in awe of what he did right across the street when Sealaska Heritage Institute didn't have this amazing building. And the idea came from Kagwask, Ishmael Hope, and Shteoteen, Kathy Ruddy, because Kashkawu Cyril George would come and visit our classes at UAS. He would give such inspirational statements to the students. And there were times, as I kept working with him, I realized he couldn't hear anymore. He would ask me questions, and I would shout it as loud as I could. And he would just and I could tell he couldn't hear. And so I want to acknowledge Kathy Ruddy for the work that she did. She would drive him there. She would type things up so he could read it. She even hired someone to come, and when there was a presentation at the University of Alaska Southeast, and we hosted the Alaska Native Studies Conference, she hired someone to type out the entire speech of the keynote speaker because he was asked to give a response, but he would not be able to hear. So as I was going through and adjusting some translation and transcription of the Ak-Tatsin story that he told to us across the street, I kept thinking about this phrase, and someone asked me about it recently too, through text. And the phrase is Katuch Ka Tukachsekehin Yujudutliha. You have been sent to the peaceful river. And there's a verb in here that's wonderful. It's the same verb you would use to follow someone's footprints or to track if you're trying to get a deer and you're trying to follow the deer through the woods. It's the same verb if you took a basket apart, because sometimes you need to figure out how someone wove that thing. It's the same verb you would use to undo your sewing, like say if you made a mistake and you need to rip it back. It's the same verb you would use to untangle a ball of yarn. So it's the river that untangles a person's mind. For me, we used to talk about like, how do you say decolonization in Tlingit? I was like, I don't know, like throw all the colonial stuff out the window, I don't know. But then I was like, oh, well, there's this river and there's this story and we need to untangle our mind. That's what we're talking about with decolonization. And there's a lot to it in decoloniality, and this is all part of understanding the narrative of what's going on with our languages. Because I think sometimes we'll look at these numbers and we'll say, uh-oh, it's over. Uh-oh, they got us. Uh-oh, we're dying. And I think there's some colonial sort of weirdness there that wants us to believe those stories. So I guess I would start with, it's our story to tell. And we're continually telling this story. Nothing has been determined. We are the determiners of the future of our languages. There's nothing else that can do that. It's us. It does require shifting your life. If you want to speak one of our languages and you don't, you have to change your life. You have to create that room. But that room you're creating is saying to the ancestors, we reserved a seat for you. And saying to the descendants, we reserved a seat for you. So let's start by saying, here's something from this same story. You can find the story on YouTube. Just search for Kashkawu or Ak-Tatsin. Or you can go to YouTube /UASANLS, University Alaska Southeast, Alaska Native Languages Studies. I started documenting elders I was doing it probably in the early 2000s, but I wasn't doing a great job. I just get a little camera and walk around. And then I started to think about, well, how could I do this a little better? So I started talking to people who are filmmakers. I was like, how do you do interviews? How do you make sure you can hear people? And how do you make sure that the camera's not shaky and it's not too dark? And I started getting really fascinated with that aspect of it. And so I started to document speakers. And then I realized you have to set audio levels. You have to do all this other stuff. And that means you got to work with speakers like the beloved Kingisti, who I should have known what kind of voice he had. He had a Jihad Satu. He had a Chilkat voice, one that's built to talk across a river. And so I put the microphone on him. I was like, could you talk about like how loud you're going to talk? So he was like, Haida, Haida, Haida. Then I hit record and I sat down and he goes, talk away. Blew it out. We just lived in the red. I was like, well, lesson learned, okay. And, but with Qarqawu in this story, he said, Lingít Language, ade hai atultuya, which ya awudne, which is khan, just the cut at a yak kohe kokudzati, you ah hai atultu. In our Tlingit ways of being, the way we are taught, respect for each other, love for each other, there's a spirit in everything, they say, as we are taught. Another speaker that I worked with a lot, Kahwan Ish, George Davis. He was amazing, amazing. What I try to do in my teaching, in my documentation, in my sharing of Tlingit, is to say, I found a way to learn and to get through all these obstacles, and I found a way to communicate with a lot of these old people. Cyril George would be 100. He'd be 100 today if he were alive. Kahwanish would be about the same age. And so what I want to get people to a point to say, okay, you don't need the translations anymore. Let's get you to that point where you don't need the translations. You can sit and listen to the amazing things that were just delivered. And I was recording Kahwan Ish, and I had all this fancy gear, and I put all the fancy gear away. And he says, this is what my mom used to tell me all the time. He just said this amazing thing, and I just listened to it. And then I took my phone out, and I said, could you say it one more time? And his wonderful wife, who was our meeting coordinator, she was on the phone, like, talking about, I think, Sealaska distributions and stuff. And so, like, there's a little bit of background noise and stuff, but just like, you could still get the heart of this recording. And it goes on, and it just says, like, don't talk with ill will to people. Don't do things with ill will to people. And what I'm setting the stage here, because this is what we built a language program on, was the work of people who came before us. And I just kept going to the elders and saying, tell us about our lives, tell us how to be. Because this work is hard. I talk to people all the time who quit because it's hard. And it's hard because you don't have to just like look genocide in the face and push it back and you know, try and overcome America and Canada, which are horrible things from an indigenous perspective in terms of just us being alive and having our stuff and being ourselves and speaking our languages. There was intention, there was torture, there was oppression, all these things existed. And then you have people who are hurt. And as they say, hurt people hurt people. So then we have to overcome how we treat each other. So I keep coming back to these words. This one, just tasha'an kakusakhan qa'etech tu yena'u. Yanashkwat sheshinget ani, akage de gachagwat, ukhkek qati ikusti. Only love and kindness. Put that in your heart. The world is spinning around. It's going to roll up to the place where your life will be going out of control. So what this is talking about, like if you just try to hurt people, this sickness and this hurt is going to come back on you because the world spins. We've known that for a long time. So he says just love and kindness, and we just keep putting this into the things we do. Respect, love, kindness, love. Because that's what it takes to bring a language back to health. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're talking about here today. Yigoayach kwan, yishiko hascha, yichet haswuse achkidat. Yigoayach kwan, qanech tu atitsu. Yigoayach kwan, huhanaya, hashishko hastu itchian tu at. Yigoayach kwan, shtakat yuhan. This was Shkateh, Jesse Johnny. Another speaker that I just had the tremendous good fortune to be able to encounter again and again and again. We used to bring her to Shkakwe to come and work with us. I used to go visit her in Sitka. One time I went to see her, and she was staying in a place where older folks sometimes go to live, and they're living together. And we met in the center, in this sort of meeting area, sitting around a table, just visiting, speaking lots of Tlingit. And she was Chukinshaw, and I'm Shukach Adi. So this would be a good arrangement. Because I left. I said, I gotta go now. It's so wonderful to visit with you. And I left, and another elderly lady came up and said, who was that? Who are you visiting with? And she said, that's my boyfriend. And that's a good status. That was a good status. That was when I know I was like climbing the ladders of life. And she was wonderful. So she couldn't get out of her bed anymore. So I went to her. She got to meet my firstborn child. She gave her one of her names. That's where her name comes from, Kharkhiz. It's like a person sewing that killer whale who's in the front of the pack. And so I asked her, what do speakers need, what do learners need to hear to stay motivated, to stay on track? And she used to call me. She knew what time my classes were. She'd call me before class and give me all this encouragement. Because you go back to 2011 when I started at UAS, I didn't know what I was doing. There was no roadmap for all this stuff. There was a lot of documentation, and there was a lot of material, but we just weren't at a point where we were creating speakers. And it takes a whole bunch of people. Like I want to push back on these ideas like there was this one person. Like it wasn't me. It was all these students who had the courage to speak. It was all these elders who would come into our class. Some of our classes were just elders sitting there talking to us. So this one is have strength and courage, all of you. Your grandparents are really listening to you now. Have strength and courage, all of you. Let's start walking too. Have strength and courage, all of you. It is us. We are following our ancestors. Have strength and courage, all of you, every one of you. And Kingisti, David Katzik. He was such an amazing presence. He was so incredible. He would come to our classes, and he had like an emotional response to so many things, and he was so passionate, so passionate. And he had this amazing way of speaking both Tlingit and English. And students would be nervous. They'd be doing their dialogue exercises. Wa sa iyati. Khat yak e. Wa e ko'a. Ach tu yak e. And he stands there, he's like, you are not a robot. You are not a robot. And then he always had to say like the two syllables, like, you are a human being, right? And like you could just hear Kingisti if you knew him. You could just hear him saying these things. Etuyeyeti, hayukatangi. So he was talking in this story about a sea lion. That's the story of his father's people, Qanachtidi. Wonderful story. And he says, Ade ashadahani qustiyeyeh chaq, qaqede awe qaqisa ach. Ashadahani khiwustiyi, qayaqidze awe. Tu eat ach e watan, tu kashk ide, kaya atwune, ha wuch in yeji wune, adeyati ye hayukatangi, akusti eka shingit a. The way of a leader long ago. Let yourself listen to people when you are a leader. And you are intelligent. That is how it is. To him, he told this to his nephew. Respecting people, our working together. This is the way of our language, our way of life, true human beings indeed. True human beings. So we build upon like the words of our ancestors, these ancestors who shared things with us. We have stacks and stacks of things. Tlingit is one of the most well-documented languages in North America. I would say maybe we've written down and translated 2% of what's recorded. So there's a lot of work to do, so come to the table. Generally, if you want to come to the language and you want to work in the language, be positive, be productive, be loving, be kind, be safe, be good to yourself. Avoid the pitfalls of jealousy, the pitfalls of just falling into groups that don't like each other, and these other things that are difficult, because we're people. People have patterns, but you have to be aware of all of these things. We need psychologists. We're good on the linguists, love them, but we need some We need some therapy. So Alaska is made up of 4 language families. There are 23 known languages that were in Alaska. As far as we'll get to what those languages are, but these language families, there's a large northern language family, the Inuit, Yup'ik, and Ununguch language family. There's a central one right there, Dene, which is green, which is also us. We're cousins to every language in the interior. We're cousins to all these languages down the coast. We're cousins with Navajo and Apache. Can't talk to them. Sometimes we'll catch a word. Like they'll say hagu. We're like, oh, we say hagu. I was down there. They might say a little different, but I remember I had this little tear moments. Right? But like, I think people need to know this. There's 23. How many can you name? How many teachers out in the Alaskan schools, if you just, let's get them in a room. Say, okay, write them down. How many can you get? This is critical knowledge because erasure is a thing. Part of erasure is just saying, well, I don't know that, because I don't have to think about it, because we're programmed to not think about it so that they will go away. Remember, that's the program, that's what the system wants, so we go against that system with intentionality. And we're still loving ourselves, we're still being kind, we're still laughing, we're still being fun, but we're being intentional about the things that we're changing. And that's what we'll talk about in the next 20 minutes. So Tlingit, Tlingit is our focus here. We will talk about our other cousins, our sisters, our brothers, our relatives. But Tlingit is about 54,000 square miles, according to some online thing I found. I just drew these little polygons. I was like, oh, that's a big place. It crosses into Canada. There was no border, and so I still don't think of it as, it's like stepping over a little thing, because that's our land. It's Southeast Alaska, British Columbia, and the Yukon. If it were a state in the United States, it would be the 28th largest state in Alaska. It's big territory. There's 18 communities that are Tlingit, 15 are connected by the waterways of the Inside Passage, and 3 of them are connected by roads. We have 3 active dialects of Tlingit, or 4, no, 3. One, we lost the last speaker of Tanta in the 1980s. I don't know if it's coming back. I don't know if there's intention to bring it back. We do have an understanding of how it works, but without other folks to speak with, I don't know if it's coming back. It is, though, the oldest dialect of Tlingit, because the other dialects do things that only make sense if you look back at Tanta. I do believe Tlingit merged with another language, and that's where the other dialects were born. So I'm not really into blood purity or anything like that, right? People are like, I'm an FBI, I'm a full-blooded Indian. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we don't measure that stuff, we just love people. Like I was in Hawaii, and they said, yeah, because when we saw people who came here, we're like, what would it be like to have babies with them? So, just keep loving people. That's the answer. So we have a southern dialect, we have a northern dialect, and then there's this thing that's in the middle, borrows a bit from each. Dialects have to do with a couple of different things. The vowels, so instead of this vowel, you make this vowel. Instead of this W, you're gonna make an M sound. And then the other thing is like how often things start contracting in the verb. And then there's a couple other things, like I would call it regional variation, which is kind of like dialect, which is like you call it that, but we call it this. You call it Atkashti Teach, we call it Keish Teach, where it's just a different name for the same thing. We have 61 sounds, 26 of them are not found in English. There's 4 vowels, and those vowels each have 4 variations. So you have 16 possibilities for vowels. Consonants are probably more important in Tlingit than vowels because you can drop vowels. Consonants are harder to drop, but they will change back and forth with a few of them. It gets complicated. We got words like little swan and wakachechu, eyelashes, and atunach kaditziqtzat, straw. And when we make new words for things, sometimes we're like, this is getting really long. Someone's like, what should we call a cell phone? And someone's like, qashtu atunach yuqadutli atkiat. I was like, oh, that's like, people are gonna hang up before you even get that out of your mouth. So. Okay, so here it comes. So like this phrase, I like this phrase, I found it in the verb dictionary. I want to give a lot of credit to Knott's Tla, Gillian Story, Chachuka, Constance Nash. I got to talk to them on the phone while they were in a retirement community in London. And I said, hey, can I use all the stuff in your dictionary to make a new dictionary? And they said, it's your language, do whatever you want. We're just trying to help. We're retired, we just try to do something to help. And they helped a lot. But there's all these neat sentences, and some of them are really interesting. It's like, they will throw you into the furnace while you're still alive. I was like, what was that one about? But this one, so like shatik, the verb root means to be frozen or hardened. But it's like, when you say shatik, it's like you gotta hold a container so it doesn't spill. So you gotta be kind of rigid. Like say, especially you got like a big bucket full of water or something. You gotta hold it, and you gotta use all your muscles to hold it. So this is saying, hold your spirit steady, because you're about to be delivered some news that's kind of tough. Some of this stuff is tough. Like sometimes you hear bad news, and you're just like, ah. But just avoid the colonizer, which is just a large abstract concept, wants you to give up, wants you to quit. It's not what we're gonna do. Instead, we're gonna say, what's the situation? What's the remedy? Let's go. So before we do that, look at these pictures. People gathering, babies talking to elders, and we got elders gathered in big groups. We got people laughing and learning the language. Like, we are in an active state of growth. Never forget that. You can't get too comfortable. I was even in Hawaii, and someone's like, how did you guys succeed? How'd you do it? And they said, we can never say we succeeded, because we can never rest, we can never give up, because we'll just backslide right back to where we were. And so I sometimes share that with people, and like, gee, Mr. Negative. But I just want to be sometimes realistic about this stuff, but also just say, look at the hopeful side. There are kids I can talk to in Tlingit. It's so much fun. It's a lot of fart jokes, and I'm down with that. And so like the kids are just they're just taking off with it, right? They're just doing so good. So this is the state, I think, of languages in Alaska. This is research from the Alaska Native Language Preservation and Advisory Council, which also extends out to lots of people doing lots of language work all across the state. So I'm thankful for folks who are working in Hatkil, who are working in Sealaska, for sharing information with us and with me. And you kind of go from blue to red, right? We have 4 languages that are asleep. We got to figure out, how do we bring them back? There's no speakers. There's no one left that's actively speaking it as far as we know. But we're not going to say extinct. I was at a meeting, and they said, don't say extinct. Don't call us extinct. We're doing our best. Some reporter's like, well, the extinct language of, and I was like, hey man, they just said it. You were there. And he's like, well, according to the dictionary. I was like, shut up. So, but we do have, of the majority of the languages in Alaska have 10 or fewer speakers. That means if things don't change drastically, by the time I am an elder, if everything lines up and that's my fate, then we might be down to 10 languages, maybe less. As far as where our neighbor languages are, I think, as far as we know, Hatkil has about 5. Sealaska has about 7. This is just in Alaska too. So for some of these languages, especially for some of the languages, they include speakers in Canada. For Tlingit, these numbers include everywhere in the world. Just because like focusing on what's going on with Tlingit right now, I think 90 is pretty safe. But then sometimes they'll say 40, as far as like, if we just sort of like said, okay, we're only speaking Tlingit from now on, no more English. Like I think you have 40 people who could probably communicate, just fully. And so like this is what I think the numbers look like. And how did this come to be? So like I started to see all these different, it was all over the place, like 500, 100, someone's like 10. I was like, whoa, 10? Like I know, I could call 10 people right now. I know there's more than that. And so I started to talk with people who are working in all our different communities, who are working in language, who are working in our culture, and I was just And every time I met a new speaker, I would try and have a conversation with them. Because it's sensitive stuff too. I don't like to assess people and figure out where they are, but I also want to know what we're dealing with. So it's sensitive information. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I also want to figure out like where are people at and how do we just keep leveling up? I just want to keep going higher and higher. Because I think there's about 10 speakers left right now who are irreplaceable. The way things are right now, if they were all gone, there's nobody who could be remotely close to talking like they do. Like even like we got second language speakers who are as high as we can measure right now. And I'd say there's probably 5 of them. But even those who are at that level, they're maybe half of what these other 10 are. And it's a big mystery, and how do you get up to that? Because one of the biggest things I think we're lacking is that people do talk about is places to speak. Like even at the university, we get them for 4 hours a week. So we got to try and just do a bunch of stuff, and then hope that they're doing twice as much stuff outside of the classroom. You know, digesting all this stuff, memorizing stuff. But then we need places to talk. We tried through a partnership with Sealaska Heritage Institute, Sealaska Corporation, and Gold Belt Heritage Foundation to rent houses in Juneau. Just like let's just get a house and just all live there for like a week and see. And it was wonderful. But these mechanisms aren't designed for that. These places where you can rent a house. Because they gave us bad reviews. Like, you moved the furniture, you got too many cars. And it's like, get off our land, give us, get us, you know, so we need a house. We need a language house. We're at that state of growth. And so like, but it's just ironic that we don't have a place where we can do that. Because we're developing more and more places, more and more initiatives. And I think there needs to be more. There needs to continue to be more. Because there's a lot of people who are living rent-free from my perspective. There's a lot of historical stuff that happened, and everybody has some accountability in this, which is a tough conversation to have. Because, you know, we encounter these things at the university, because they'll say, well, you can't discriminate against anyone. I'll be like, anymore, right? Because that was us. We were on the other side of these things, right? I think about this stuff all the time. So I think, you know, if you look at you look at the totals, I think you have 15 people who could really do an awful lot. Like really, that's a really good spot that they're in. We're just trying to figure out how to keep getting higher, which is just continuing to talk. We need these environments where we're just in Tlingit all the time so we talk to each other. Then you go down and you got about 75 who are at this, but the stages between like low advanced, mid advanced, and high advanced, those are huge steps, huge. And we're trying to get people to sort of be comfortable with where they're at, but also realize how far the journey is. The metaphor we often use in class is we'll say, sometimes you feel like you're right near the top of the mountain. You get up there and you realize it's just a hill in front of this giant mountain. But then I said, don't get discouraged. 99% of the people who even live on our land don't even know there's a mountain there. You know that it's there. You can see the top. You can get there. It's a lot to keep people motivated. It's a lot to keep them going. It's a lot to keep from getting distracted. Always switching over to English. Always, you know, just English, because we can communicate in English. But just to say, like, let's bring this back. Let's bring this back to a good, safe place. So basically, we have a system of measuring fluency. Time check. And so I could share this with you. I'll try and be pretty brief about this. But basically, we took the ACTFL scale, which is the American Council of Teaching Foreign Languages, and I talked a lot with folks who are working on Mohawk language, who are working in Salish languages. I was like, how are you guys measuring, you know, how people are? Because I noticed when I would tell people I teach Tlingit, they'd say, are you fluent? Like I could pull out like a card. I was like, here's my BIA card, my Tlingit Haida card, and here's my fluent card, right? And so it's not like an on-off switch. I was like, it's fluency, right? Don't get this on-off switch. Just say, where are you on here? Oh, okay, cool. Well, let's get to here. Let's get to here. And for me, the metaphor is like if we're climbing a mountain, we're helping everybody up. Nobody's going up ahead. We're not going to leave you behind. It takes a lot. It's a lot. So basically, like, we track this stuff. There's a lot of folks who had a lot of input into this, and it's like, there's two things that I usually look at: understanding and speaking. And some people could do like reading, writing, a bunch of other stuff. Like, I just want to make sure people could talk. Can you understand? You start to understand more, and then you get up to like, oh yeah, I recognize what they're saying, right? And this is beginner level. And what we do at the university, we say, at the end of 1 year, you should be a beginner. At the end of the second year, you should be intermediate. At the end of the third year, you should be advanced. Because some people say, well, I'm not intermediate, so I think I'll take beginning again. I was like, don't go back. You can't go. It's like, if you're going to hike a mountain, say, well, made it about 10% up the mountain. I think I'll go back to the bottom and do it again. Right? No, you do go up the mountain. So then you go to intermediate and you start to, and it's interesting too, because as a learner, you're just sitting there, all of a sudden someone says something and you're like, whoa, I know what they said. Whoa. And it's different than a lot of other things because it's not a gradual, it is gradual, but it's also sudden. Like all of a sudden you're listening to someone, you're like, oh yeah, wait a minute, I could understand that. And those are wonderful. I live for those moments, those light bulb moments where people are like, wow, I'm getting it. Then we get up to advanced and you can start sort of really being able to accurately interpret things. You're not getting lost. There's not a lot of gaps, because when you're at the intermediate level, you're like, well, they're talking about like a black bear. I don't know what they're saying. Went up a hill maybe. But for advanced, like, what's being said, but if someone asked you, like if you're at kind of the lower level, someone's like, what do they say? Like, it'd be hard to say it, but you know it. It's just hard to translate it. And with comprehension, to get up to advanced high, you have to stop translating for yourself. That's very hard to do because your English brain is like a spoiled little toddler. It's like, me, what about me? I want to know, right? And so you have to sort of overcome that and become someone who has two different whole thought worlds in their own body. And one of those thought worlds comes from a colonizing perspective, because it does. It does. It's not an innocent language that just happens to be here. Not saying that all the people are bad. I'm just saying you can't escape the fact this language came to erase all the others. You can't escape that. You have to be conscious of it and continually aware of it. So then we get up to like superior, where it's like you can just understand everything. And you could, if someone says something and then you can understand it all, and if someone asks you, you could translate it. And so these are things where it's getting up, it's beyond, we can't measure these areas right now, because we don't have enough of a base to sort of be there. But we know some people have reached this point, because, we just know that. For speaking, it's like knowing some words, getting up, and then you can kind of count them. Like, yeah, I think I know about like 500 words, I know about like 50 phrases. And then you start to sort of learn how to use these ones at the right time for different things and start substituting them. You say, I want water. I learned how to say that. Now I say, I want money, I want time, I want this, I want that, right? Then it goes up to like being able to start initiating conversation. I could jump into a conversation. It's not all just this beyond memorization, which is a challenge, right? You cannot memorize our languages. They're too complicated. There are a lot of racists who came here and said their language is primitive, simple. No, it's like, if I ever had like 3 wishes, like someone's like, you got 3 wishes. Like, bring that person back and put them in advanced Tlingit. I would waste a wish on like someone who just said because I hate those words, primitive and savage. Like, people still publish stuff today that still says that stuff about us, even though they're just quoting someone. Well, they said it. I think it's time to like get rid of that stuff in the textbooks that we assign and the textbooks that we read. So as we go up, it's like, as we start getting into advanced, can you imagine? Can you theorize? Can you tell me what's going to happen? Can you tell me your opinions? Why don't you like pickles? I could tell you all about pickles and why I don't like them. But, so could you do and could you have a disagreement with someone without it becoming a war because you don't have the words, right? And so these are some things that we try to get folks to. And then, can you mimic the masters? Could you tell this Al-Tatsin story and get people to the peaceful river? Because that's what we're trying to do. So for me, it comes back to things like this. I'm always thinking about stuff like this. There's the language. Fluency for me is how familiar is an individual with the language? How likely are they to understand what they're hearing? How likely are they to be able to say what they want to say? Normalization, is the language on the land? Do you just walk around and see it? Do we know the place things? Do we know where Zantik Ihini is? Do we know where Echkontin is? Do we know where Tlachsetunjin is? Do we have to keep saying someone's like, I live on Mendenhall Point Road. I was like, Mendenhall Point Road? And then there's Mendenhall Boulevard, Mendenhall Back Loop, Mendenhall Avenue, and Mendenhall Mall. Guy's never even been here, right? So it's like, he's probably fine. But all those places had names already, and we can use those names. And when you walk into a place, do you see it? When you go to Hawaii, people have signs, say, Ikomamai, come in. Could we have signs that say, Nechka? Everywhere. And it's getting there. You're starting to see signs of bathrooms and stuff that's in Tlingit. Then there's the vernacular, which is a little bit more complicated. But it's saying, when people talk to each other, what language do they use? Is your language a handshake language? Do you say, hi, how are you? I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Okay, what happened the other? And then you switch, right? Can you just do all that? What do people want to talk about? They want to talk about sports? Do they want to talk about, who's having babies with who, and who got married, and who's doing this, and who's doing that, who got in trouble, all that stuff. Do it all in the language. Figure out how to say all those things. Even that guy from that band is having an affair with that other person with whatever. Say it in the language, figure it out. There's ways. I had to ask how do you say messing around? It's like, whoosh kagede. I was like, ooh. Then there's reclamation. Reclamation means there's these places, physical and social, where the language used to exist. We're taking them back. Could a restaurant in our community say, it's Tlingit language night because we're on Tlingit Ani? You can only speak Tlingit in our restaurant, and you get 10% off if you can speak. Or so, I don't know. Of course, this is my sales pitch, right? Hey, give me free dinner, right? But can we all go shopping together? Can we, there's a store somewhere in town. And I was like, let's just go there for our class. We'll take our class there and go shopping. And we'll shop in the language. And someone said, you better call him. I was like, ooh. So I called him. I was like, can we do this? And I said, just don't get in anybody's way. And what I wish that they would have said is yeah, get someone on the intercom to tell people stuff and Tlingit. I wish they were excited about it. But maybe they'll get there. But while we were there, a group of students was walking around, standing in the language. We gave everyone little cards, said, we're not being rude, we're just trying to stay in our language. We'll talk to you in English later if you don't know Tlingit. And they're sitting there talking in Tlingit about something, and there's some people next to them, and they said, they want to live here, they better learn how to speak English. I said it loud enough for them to hear. And I was like, that's an interesting sentiment, but you had the wrong language. So yes, substitute Tlingit for that, and then I might agree with that statement. So but you take these places back, and that takes intention, that takes effort, that takes collaboration. So we're building this comprehensive language program. I don't have time to go into the whole thing, but there's a lot of intention, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a language nest, there's a TCLL program in the schools. It's expanding out into, there's gonna be a point where Tlingit is in every school in the Juneau area. And so we're gonna, Kwan Ani, not to call it Juneau. And we're gonna try and expand that model out. In Huna, you have to take a Tlingit class to graduate high school. That's the model. So as we sort of look at this stuff, to start to sort of wrap this up on what we're trying to do, because we are on an increase. I can look at the numbers, I'll show you what's going on, and I'll show you that it's effective. So we built a Bachelor of Arts degree in Indigenous Studies. It launched this year at the University of Alaska Southeast. We couldn't have done this without our partners, especially Sealaska Heritage Institute, Sealaska Corporation, Gold Belt Heritage Foundation, Central Council of Tlingit and Haida, Douglas Indian Association. And we're gonna reach out and try and get more folks on board. But it's also behind all of this stuff, it shouldn't be just the native entities who are making this happen. And we're getting a lot of support. There's support in the Department of Education in Alaska to make a lot of substantial changes. And I'm going to show you what some of those changes are. But you can get a degree now, and it's a 4-year degree, and you could choose one of your 3 focus areas. You can go with languages, or you can go with arts, or you can go with governance. And now we have a plan to put a master's degree on top of each one. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're proposing a Master of Arts in Teaching Indigenous Languages. We're writing it right now, be the first one in Alaska, and we're going to try and replicate it at UAA and UAF so we can have fully licensed and certified teachers of Indigenous languages. So once you have that track, then I guess related to this is because of Sealaska Heritage Institute and my incessant saying like this needs to happen, we have created 0 credit, $0 options for all of our language classes. You can study any of our languages without having to pay any money. And that's because Sealaska Heritage went and got the money, and UAS, before SHI even got the grant, said, go for it. If they don't get the grant, we'll figure it out. But, and so we just said, what if we remove all of the barriers? What if we took everything out of the way? Because a few years ago, people would say, more scholarships, more scholarships. I said, no, I don't want anybody to apply for anything. I want them to just walk in the door. I want them to just hop on the Zoom meeting. And it doesn't guarantee they're going to become a speaker, but we can at least say the doors are open. There's no doors on the Clan House anymore. And the result is we're going to fill 500 seats this semester. And a lot of them, the majority of them are for languages. So we have language, governance, Northwest Coast arts. The whole thing's on a rise. And it's on a rise because we're kind of taking over. We're trying to take over the thing. Don't tell them. Or I guess tell them. I don't know. It's a land back. It's everything back, right? Because we should have been there in the first place. We shouldn't have had to do all this stuff to get there. But that's what we're doing right now. And so the last thing I think that we need to do is we need to adjust this. I think it's the statute. I don't know. I don't know how this stuff works. I pitch the ideas to people who know how the things work, and then we collaborate. So I'm like, just do the thing with the thing. And so this is the requirement to graduate high school in Alaska. All you got to do is add one more bullet point that says 1 unit of credit of an Alaska Native language. And then everybody who wants to graduate high school in Alaska is going to have to take an Alaska Native language. And they're going to freak out. There was some senator who was always against the things that we're trying to do. And at one point, he got real dramatic. He says, we're 1 step away from mandating Alaska Native languages. I was like, whoo, 1, let's go. Let's go then. And so this is what we're going to do. These people who were scared of this, they would say, you're just going to have racial tension. You have racial tension if you do this. Same thing they were saying when they said, don't let Native people go into these buildings because there'll just be racial tension. Same ridiculous, unfounded argument. Because if you come to our languages, you find love, you find respect, you find caring, you find the river that entangles a person's mind. And I want to give a lot of credit to the folks who have done this. We said, bring your kids. Let's just work with your kids and Tlingit. And Dash Ginny is in the middle. She's our main teacher in our language nest. Shkeiki is over here. She's teacher in Huna. And we have Kachtin. He's teaching at UAS now. And all these kids are growing up and they can speak Tlingit. It's amazing. It's amazing. They don't have all these barriers, but we have to help our adults more with their barriers. There's pain. There's trauma. There's doubt. We doubt ourselves. But that's a program. That's a program that we can deprogram that stuff. But it takes intention. So I'll close with the words of Chukatine Jane Smarch. These might have been her last words. We were sending videos back and forth. We knew that she wasn't going to make it out of this trip to the hospital. She was a beautiful, amazing human being. And she said, "Chu'uya, ekahwin, hete yashanai sha'at, adeha yukatangi." It's as if all of you are leading flowers in this direction, the way you are working on our language and our way of life. So we know that this is the brightening of our future. And our future is determined by us, and our future is brighter than it's been. So we had this dip, which was colonization, racism, and the horrors of it. But we emerge with intention of making sure that a couple generations from now, they'll be in stunned disbelief. People didn't learn our languages here? What kind of crazy world were you guys living in? That's the future that we envision. That's the future I envision. And I'm hoping that you share that as well. Thank you for listening.
Sheesh. Does everyone need a moment to reflect before we go into Q&A? Are there any questions in the audience?
Lugon Dorgsen, Hune, Godam Tivan Gwa, na Yagwa Walayu, Gavaskus, Alyak Shamalyak, at Askadi Amshuam. Lugon Dorgsen for speaking with us today. I had an issue with my son, King Devon, going to school. I wrote down that he spoke Shamalia as at home, and I learned, I think just last week, that he got put into a special reading group. So those are walls that I want to knock down. Lugon Dorgsen for everything that you do in our languages.
Direction. I thought of your name today, like even before we came, I was walking around the house getting ready to come here, and your name came to mind. So I'm glad you asked this question. This isn't the first time we've heard it. And these are the ways the systems reflect, and this is what we call coloniality. So when you have colonialism, they would say, don't speak your language. If you speak it here, we'll punish you. We'll do all these horrible things. And we've got stories about the horrors that people did. Coloniality is, oh, you speak that language, you must be less than something else. That must be a detriment. And this is not the first time. We've heard of folks, because they say, do you speak any other languages in your home? And you should be saying, heck yes, we do. We speak the language that was born on this land and that should be here forever. And then the school should be like, whoa, we'll send you a basket of candy, dry fish, we'll send you dry fish. Free dry fish for the families who are speaking their languages. But what's happening is they're putting them into these ESL classes, and they're putting them in, they're assuming that there's a detriment there for their education. And this is rooted in this idea of modernity and white supremacy. And the way that I first started, well, I've been thinking about it a long time because I get treated differently a lot of different places I go. But someone who used to teach about our people, used to teach anthropology, just sent me this random email. I didn't ask for it. It said, well, I think this language school is a great idea, just to teach them all in Tlingit. But how are you going to get them ready for the modern world, for the real world? So I wrote back, I was like, oh man, we're really real. We're really modern. But I think we need to, that's the kind of stuff we need to squash, is this reaction that it's a bad thing, or it's going to get in the way of their education, because that shows you education is still a program of assimilation. And so I'd be happy to take up that fight with you.
Ganesh Hunyukat Dosak Kagwantan Ayat and Dr. Tanyeri Ayat. Wow, Kuzi Ganesh, I really inspired and appreciating this. There were many things I appreciate that really stood out to me, but the one that I like, yes, I remember hearing this. I was fortunate enough for work to be able to go to Aotearoa and hear the Maori and see, and similar to Hawaii, how they have really brought their languages back to a real strong place, and it's in public. You do see signs, but they also said, you know, yes, we are succeeded in bringing the language back strong, and yes, we also see a challenge in keeping it alive with our youth. And so I was thinking to myself, as we are growing the language, and as we now have more people speaking language, and you're talking about having a place, Maybe there are already some things you're doing, or maybe you might want to share one or two things that you're doing to try to keep the language going, like just being able to talk with each other to keep it, but also what kind of things can you maybe, are there a couple ideas, like if you could wave a wand, what would you love to see our youth to be able to do? Or our new speakers are both young, but also adult speakers, so what do you imagine?
Sheesh. Well, what I would hope is that the next meeting of the Juneau School District on the agenda is going to be, which school are we going to give to the Tlingit? Because we're outgrowing our spaces, and we shouldn't be a program within the thing kind of model. We need to be the thing as well. So everything that exists needs to be also inclusive of us to the point where, yeah, we have one of those. Of course we do. And so if they want to let me pick, I'll pick one. I'll take the newest one, whatever it is. But I think one of the things, there's a number of things that I think we need right now. And I've been kicking around this idea of, I don't know what to call it, but like a Tlingit social coordinator. Because we have classes, we have activities, we have other things. But I think we need people to organize gatherings, and some of those could be on Zoom, and some of those could be in person. And it's, okay, we're going to study this night, we're going to shop together this night, we're going to talk this night, because one of the challenges is there's nowhere to speak it. And so they run into this in Hawaii, they run into this in Aotearoa, where when they go home, can they talk to their parents? And you're starting to get that now. And then when they go out into the community, can they just speak it? And we're starting to get that as well. And so I think creating dedicated spaces, like one of the visions that I had when Kahuaniish and Katkawu were still alive, I don't think it was any coincidence that they lived in one-bedroom apartments and that they lived in trailers. And I'd say, you know what? I don't think we valued our speakers over the course of time. And so I think what we should do is build a neighborhood of Tlingit-speaking peoples. They did this with Gaelic, they did it with Welsh, I believe. And not to, sometimes people are like, well, I don't know about segregation. It's not segregation. If you're learning the language, committed to speaking it, you get a house in the neighborhood, like some kind of discount or something. I don't know. But then I said at that time we had maybe 10 speakers who were really active, probably less, 5, who were going into the schools, who were letting us into their house, who were talking to us a whole lot. And I said, give them a house. Give them $50,000 a year at least. And just don't make them do timesheets or anything. Just say, tell us when you're tired. And I shared this idea with someone who said, social welfare doesn't work. I said, it's not welfare. They've been working at our language their whole life. They kept it alive for us, despite being beaten and humiliated and embarrassed. And now they should get theirs. They should get theirs. And so I think a neighborhood would be pretty wonderful. I think we need a culture camp here that's ours and that's very nice, has smokehouses, has healing things like a sauna and just like massage tables, like go all out. I went to this conference in Hawaii and we got these lumi massages and we go out on a canoe and I was like, this is a conference? This is the best conference of my life. But I think we should have all the best stuff at this place because we have to go to rent places and we have to go, and it's complicated and it's not the fault of the people who are there now, but we have to rent things from religious organizations who have a historical role in making things bad for us here. And I think there needs to be, one is we need our own space to do our own thing. So it can look like us, it can be us, and we can go there and that's ours. The other thing is I do think some more of these organizations, like schools, like governments, and like churches, need to step forward and say, we did that, we are so sorry, it was wrong, here's what we're doing to chip in. Because it shouldn't be just us trying to figure it out.
There's a question on the live stream. For those that are in the free UAS language classes, will there be future opportunities to take intermediate and advanced classes? And I believe they're all free, yeah?
Yeah, it's free sections for every language class we teach. So bring it on. And so we're going crazy because we don't know how to teach 100 people at a time. But that's a better problem than sitting there with 5 people every night and just looking at the numbers and thinking, that's not enough. There's 25,000 Tlingit people at least. And, you know, when we look at the numbers, oh, we're getting up to 200. Okay, we're getting close to, what, 1%, 0.1? I don't even know the math on that. And so it's like we are making progress, but we've got to figure out how to do more and get more, and also push back on these ideas that we're looking for some kind of handout or something that we don't deserve.
Back in 2019, the 5th graders came here. They're all speaking Tlingit. I thought that was awesome. Are they still doing that in the public schools?
Yeah, they are. So in TCLL, that's our strongest program here on the Akwan Ani. And I was sitting at Celebration. Here's a story of joy, I think. And I loved talking with your mom. She was such an amazing Haida language teacher. But we were at Celebration, and we're watching the TCLL dance group, and they spoke all Tlingit. And they come up there, and they're introducing themselves. And you know, a lot of us know each other. And there's a young girl introducing herself. She says, "Kiksadi ayachat qakan hit yidach." So I'm Kiksadi from the Sun House. So she says qakan hit. And there's these 2 like 4-year-olds sitting here, and they're just being 4-year-olds, a little rambunctious, you know, but they're so good, and they just watch these dance groups. And as soon as they heard qakan hit, the little girl goes, "Qakan?" And the little boy turns around and goes, "She's not from Qakan. Don't listen to her." And I just fell out of my chair. This is so funny, you know, because they're learning, but they can understand, right? So they understand these things, and when we speak to them, we drop kids into this language nest. They can't understand any of our language. You go back there in 2 weeks, and we're talking to them, and they're doing the things we say. They're saying the things that we want them to say, like, "Can I come inside? Is it okay if I come in? Is it okay if I leave the table?" They're saying it, like they could do it. And so it's amazing that these things work and that they're effective. And that I think we need to we can't let it falter, because when they go to 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, what happens? Do they still have that immersive, loving environment where the whole class is going, "We're going to Huna to pick berries"? What? Amazing. That's school? Amazing.
Adding our language as a requirement for high school. And as we all know, that when we start off with the little ones, they're very good at grasping the sounds and being able to repeat it back. And it seems like we would really work with our grade school kids to continue, and maybe not follow language, but like dancing or cutting fish and using the language, and keep advancing till they're in high school. So they are the ones that will say, "We like that requirement of our language." You know, they're the one that's going to be standing full force behind it. So I think that's very good. And I know there's a way. Thank you.
Sheesh. Yeah, I think with ideas like this, you get one generation of resistance, and then it gives way. It gives way to like just being a human being, which a human being, I think it's not in a human being's nature to try and destroy like a whole other group of them. And so these are the things, like decolonization is a reconnection with humanity for both the colonized and the colonizer and the descendants. Because like all these, there's a reason why people don't talk about this stuff a lot in schools, because it's uncomfortable, because it creates a situation where you have to look at that and say, well, how do we become something different? And I think here, because there were these 2 groups, the only way to do so is to indigenize the things. And it's not, you know, we've encountered this at the university. We say, everybody's invited, we have a feast. And someone says, I don't feel welcome. It's like, we just said everybody's invited. We didn't say everybody but you. And so, you know, but we want to work with people on those and be like, you got something to work through there, where you feel like you don't belong here. Because we are welcoming in our spaces. We are loving. We have lots of people who aren't Tlingit, who learn our language, who use it. And they do so in an environment of safety and respect and love, despite all the, people used to talk about how, maybe this will be the last thing I say. So I was teaching a class in Sitka, and we were just having fun. And someone came up to me, and I'll give her a little bit of slack, because I think sometimes when you get older, like you start to lose a little bit of your memory, and your filter sort of goes a little bit. And I think that was the case. Because she came out, she said, that was wonderful. I was like, oh, gulchish. And she said, I didn't realize people who weren't Tlingit could learn Tlingit. Like, I didn't know that was allowed. I was like, oh yeah, it's allowed, everybody should. You go to other countries, if you're gonna go live there, you should learn the language that they speak. So yeah, everybody should speak it. Then she said, I also didn't realize you guys laughed. It's like, I was a little taken aback, but I was like, oh yeah, we laugh all the time. Like it wasn't very funny when people were stealing our land and keeping us from speaking our language, but we were still over here telling jokes, so. Stick with it. Don't give up. Believe in yourself, believe in each other, hold each other up, keep these values central, because you'll find that things will lean towards fighting with each other and distrusting each other and distrusting yourself. Those are all the mechanisms designed to slow us down, and we can overcome them. I believe in that. I believe in you. I'm looking forward to these brighter futures. Gulchish, how
On behalf of Sealaska Heritage Institute, Gulchish, Shangukedi, Ukachadi Yadi. Lance is my father's clan, and as a member of the opposite Eagle clan, and in the spirit of Wuchiach, maintaining spiritual, social balance, as a member of the Shangukedi, I want to say Gulchish to Lance and the words that he shared, so that his words do not can float around unrecognized and unappreciated. So Gulchish, we thank you for your passion, for your inspiration, and your sacrifices. We know that being a public figure, promoting our language, promoting our culture, helping us understand that our language is more than just words, and teaching our young people the meaning behind that, and carrying, walking in the footsteps of our ancestors, all these values that come with language, but also Gulchish for building bridges with our non-native community, with our education institutions. Hune is one of our rare and very precious warriors, and it's no coincidence that he resembles our raven warrior up here on the last screen. So, Gulchish.
Okay.
And we have another lecture. Our next lecture is coming up on Tuesday, September 27th, with Ed Thomas, who will be presenting on his clan, the Suktinedi origin, as well as their recent totem pole raising. It'll be in person here on Tuesday, September 27th, as well as online. Thanks for joining. Gulchish.